We all tend to believe what our brain tells us without ever questioning it. After all, if you can't trust your own brain, then what can you trust? In general, this is very beneficial to us. Our brain has been wired to warn us of potential danger and to find solutions to problems that we encounter on a daily basis. The trouble is that sometimes it might be warning us of a danger that doesn't exist, namely the thought of participating in any sort of social interaction. In these instances, you may want to second guess what your brain is trying to tell you. It's not that your brain is deliberately lying to you, it's just that it may have developed some faulty pathways that are not serving you well and that are keeping you stuck in crippling fear. Hey there, I'm Neil and I struggle with social anxiety disorder for more than 2 decades. On this channel, every week, I'll be bringing you some of the best methods and strategies that I've used in my own life to feel more confident. There are many ways that your brain can lie to you and keep you stuck in social anxiety mode and avoidance. In this video, I'm going to go over some of the main ways it does this so that you can be on the lookout for them. Okay, so one of the main and possibly most destructive ways that our brains can do this and lie to us is through our self-talk and through automatic negative thoughts. I've heard some people refer to this as the inner critic, and it's really just all these thousands and thousands of thoughts that we have going through our heads every single day, most of which that we're probably not even aware of, and we just repeat them to ourselves over and over again, and they can lead to us having very maladaptive thinking patterns that keep us locked in a negative state and prevent us from growing. They can lead to lots of stress and anxiety, and generally we'll just feel bad overall. Examples of some of these thoughts that might be going through our heads could be things like I'm boring, or I'm weird, I'm boring to talk to, people don't want to talk to me, and our brain will just draw these conclusions based on little to no evidence. It will do these based on things out of fear rather than any logical argument. When we're told something over and over again, we begin to believe it. So maybe we were bullied at school, or somebody said something to us that wasn't very nice, and then we kept on repeating that to ourselves over and over again until it became so automatic, it became a habit, and our brains just continue to recycle that information as part of our self-talk over and over again. So somebody else might have said it to us in the first place, but we continue to recycle those thoughts. Or maybe nobody even said anything and we just assumed something, and because we keep on repeating that over and over again to ourselves, then it will just keep us locked in anxiety until we begin to actually try and break that cycle. One of the most important things to realise is that our brains are built for survival, not to make us happy. So if we have negative experiences, or experiences that our brains have perceived as being negative, then it will do its best to lock in those threats to try and protect us every time we're in a social situation. So every time we do the so-called dreaded activity, it will make us feel anxious in an attempt to protect us. Our brains are also lazy, and they'll take the path of least resistance whenever possible. So if we've continued to recycle these negative statements to ourselves, then we've likely built up some very strong pathways towards feeling anxious overall, which our brains will take nearly every time unless we try to manually override that. These automatic negative thoughts can be further categorized into various patterns of thinking known as cognitive distortions. All cognitive distortions are inaccurate patterns of thinking that can cause psychological damage. There are a number of different cognitive distortions, but people with social anxiety disorder tends to have 3 or 4 main ones that keep it going. So number 1 is the mental filter. This is where you focus and fixate on just one piece of negative information, even when there might be dozens of positive pieces of information that contradict what you're thinking. This happens because once you believe something so strongly, then your brain will automatically begin to search for evidence that supports that belief, and it will disregard all the evidence that actually contradicts it. Even though there might be overwhelming evidence that this isn't true, your brain will just automatically push that to one side, and it will just take in the evidence that it's searching for. This can lead you to have a very pessimistic view of socializing. So for instance, if you have a friend and they made a negative comment towards you, then you might disregard all the years of positive comments you've had and just fixate on the negative. I know as human beings we're naturally wired to focus on the negatives anyway, because it's just part of the survival mechanism, but it can also really serve us badly because socializing is one of the biggest things we need and is important to our survival. The next cognitive distortion is mind reading, and this is one that I know I do all the time and I'm still working really hard to deal with it. And it is, as it sounds, it's that we automatically assume that we know what the other person is thinking, and we think that they're thinking negative things about us. We'll just look for things like facial expressions and anything at all to support that belief, often without even realizing it. There can be times where maybe there is evidence that somebody is displeased or disapproving of something we've done, but most of the time that's very uncommon, and even if they are, it really doesn't matter because people are far too wrapped up in their own lives to care about what we may be doing. We may see a stranger and think they've got a negative expression on their face, and that might lead us to think that they're thinking bad thoughts about us and judging us when they might just be wrapped up in their own world or having a bad day and they barely even notice we're there anyway. The third very common cognitive distortion is should statements. Should statements are statements we make to ourselves about things we think we should be doing, we ought to be doing, or we think we must be doing, and these can manifest themselves in very extreme negative ways, saying things to ourselves like, I can't do this, I could never do that, etc. In the context of social anxiety, we might say things like, I should be able to talk to people without feeling anxious. I just can't get up on stage and talk to other people. Presentations always make me feel anxious. And when we say these extreme statements to ourselves repeatedly, then our brains are just going to latch onto them and they're just going to make us feel anxious whenever we do the dreaded event. I'll go into more detail about the different types of cognitive distortions in future, and I'll put links down in the description to those. One of the worst and most destructive habits that our brains can lead us to do through all the constant lies that get recycled to us is that of avoidance. And because of all the past social events that our brains have flagged as being dangerous, we may end up staying in on a Friday or a Saturday night and just watching TV, just playing video games, getting that instant gratification because our brains don't realise the rewards that exist out there if we actually go and socialise. Our brains just want to keep using the old existing pathways because it's lazy, it's just easier to keep on doing that. It thinks that if we stay in the evenings, then it served us well, we're still alive, we've done it before for many, many years and we're still okay, so why risk going out? Why risk going out in the world and potentially feeling anxious in a social situation where our brain thinks that we might actually die? So we need to begin to work on the habit of actually going out more gradually, and then with time our brain will begin to realise that socialising can actually be rewarding through delayed gratification. Once our brains begin to realise that going out and socialising can actually be fun and rewarding, it will begin to work for us and try and nudge us to go out and be sociable. The hardest bit is actually getting up and going out in the first place and getting started. A lot of overcoming social anxiety is really just moving and acting against what your brain is telling you and learning to create these new habits, learning to realise that there are the rewards at the end of it and teaching that to your brain. So when I first started really trying to get a handle on going out more, there was a lot of internal resistance in my brain, and it would tell me not to go out, not to socialise, and contacting friends more often to actually go out was something that I found a real struggle to do because it's something I wasn't used to. So my brain would always follow that pathway of least resistance and try and tell me not to do these things. I also started to do things like going to a lot more meetup events that I found online and doing a lot more things like volunteering. And I go to online events as well as real world events too to really get a good mixture of different types of socializing. But it did take a long time to build these habits, and especially towards the beginning, if I took a break, it would take me quite a long time to get back on doing that. But now, even if I were to take a week or two out, I can quite easily get back to it because my brain realizes the rewards a lot more, so it's a lot easier to do that. I've been doing it now for a number of years, so it's very much ingrained in my brain to do it, and I can go out on a Friday night, a Saturday night, I can go and do all these things, and I don't have all that internal resistance that I once had, but it did take quite a few months to really start to build that habit to make it become a lot more natural. Social anxiety disorder is really just one big lie. Our brains will try and protect us and tell us not to go out, and it will cause us to feel really fatigued and overwhelmed and drained, when really, if we just get up and start to do things, then quite often that fatigue will start to fade away and we'll realise that we weren't actually tired after all. It was just our brain lying to us. All these automatic negative thoughts that we experience that go through our brains every day are based on nothing but lies. And if we don't do anything to challenge them, then we'll just continue to believe them, because whatever we don't challenge, we're always going to believe. So if you acknowledge them, you acknowledge that the thought is not accurate, and you begin to change it to something more rational, then gradually, over time, things will start to get more and more easier, and instead of working against you, your brain will begin to work for you. If you enjoyed this video and you want to watch more, then check out my next one, where I'll be going into detail about some of the other types of cognitive distortion. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.